Let's move on to another midfielder who, although he hasn't featured this season, had an excellent last season. David Turnbull at Motherwell. He obviously had that move to Celtic, which fell through as well. A fantastic season last year. He's still very, very young. People might be thinking, why is he on this list, Stefan, if he's not played this season? What would you say to those people?
I'd call them fools. I obviously, he hasn't played at all. Actually, that's a lie. He's played maybe 2 or 3 games, I think, for Motherwell before the season came down. But I think the fact that he's so high on our list just kind of underlines how highly we think of him. And I think also Scottish football as a whole probably values him. Obviously, we have to go back to last season's stats to kind of illustrate how good of a player he is. But so bear with me while I do exactly that. I think one of the interesting things about Turnbull is that although he's a midfielder, I think his actual strengths lie in having the kind of proficiency and accuracy to score goals like a really top-class striker. He scored an outstanding amount of goals last year for Motherwell. In fact, he contributed to 33% of their league goals last season, which is actually a higher contribution to Motherwell than Cosgrove did for Aberdeen, to put it into perspective. And the thing that really, really excites me about him is that although he was only 10th in the league for shots last season, he was actually top for accuracy. And to put that into some real perspective, his shot accuracy was actually higher than your Morelos's or Edwards or Griffiths or whatever, or Cosgroves. And this is a guy who's basically hitting shots from the edge of the box on the run, latching onto speculative crosses from either wing and stuff. And I honestly think that's probably the most exciting thing about him. It'd be one thing if he just had this kind of sheer physicality to get up and down the box and he was a bit of a beast and he was impressive that way, or it'd be one thing if he was quite tidy on the ball. But the fact that he just seems to be so outstanding at scoring goals from just about any angle, from just about any distance, obviously within reason, makes me think that you're really looking at a top-class player here. To kind of put it into perspective in the Premiership, I'd actually maybe liken him to maybe like Ryan Christie, who seems to be very good at just kind of picking out goals from nowhere for Celtic when they really need to. That's obviously maybe something that Celtic valued themselves when they tried to sign him. I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up going back to Celtic when, he gets back on his feet and when, frankly, Scottish football gets back on its feet. But I think one of the things that always kind of sticks out for me when I think of Turnbull is I think it was Michael Stewart on Sports Scene one weekend kind of going through a compilation of what he had done for Motherwell last season, compared him to Michael Ballack. And although, Michael Ballack was one of the best players in the world, I think that's actually quite an apt comparison in the sense of like just the kind of player he is. He just strikes me as this absolute colossus who is so hard to defend against, because although he's technically a midfielder, at any point in the game he's just going to show up and score a goal, almost like a second striker or something. So the he's only 20 years old. He's got his whole career ahead of him. Hopefully this injury to his knee or the surgery that he had to get that kind of called off the Celtic move will be something that pays dividends for him down the line in his career, and hopefully, rather than this being a bump in the road, this is something that kind of helped completely avoid something really nasty down the road rather. So I think it's a superb talent, and I think it's an absolute testament to what he might be able to offer going forward, that he hasn't hardly played at all this season, but we still think he's maybe the 4th most exciting player in Scottish football right now.
I mean, we've maybe mentioned this point for a few players in the list in previous podcasts, but you feel like he might be kind of top of the list of people who might benefit from this prolonged break. Obviously, as you mentioned, Stefan, he's had a couple of appearances this season and was on the bench for Motherwell in another game, but it might give him just that longer time to rehab and kind of get some fitness back before we kind of get through this and football resumes at whatever point. That said, it was obviously a serious injury. James, are you pretty confident though, given that he's only 20 years old, that he can rediscover that form and that level that he had in that season that was so impressive for the Fir Park side?
Well, I mean, I certainly hope so, but I mean, yeah, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physiotherapist. I don't know. But yeah, like Stefan's saying, like, yeah, I mean, it's obviously, yeah, we're basing this off of what he did last season, but I think it's important just to remember just how good he was last season. Like, Stefan's made a lot of good points, and like particularly, with his shooting from distance. I mean, he got 5 goals from outside the box last season. I think that's the most of any Premiership player. like we say, he was playing for a Motherwell team that were, pretty honking for the first half of the season, but then they sort of turned it around. And I think that if he can recapture the form he was at the previous season, like I don't think we can expect it to happen immediately. But I mean, he was just outstanding. I mean, it's Stefan sort of touched on it there as well, but his movement is just superb. I mean, like he seems to find these wee pockets of space, and that signifies to me that he's actually a really intelligent player, because he does create these little openings for himself, and then once he's got that opening, as we've seen, he is completely deadly. With the ball at his feet, he's not like one of these guys who's crazy fast. And I actually think the comparison with someone like Ballack stylistically is a really apt one, because he's one of these guys that he is really technical with the ball at his feet. He's not like an incredibly skillful player. He's not particularly fast, but he's just got that intelligence and that technical ability to just really turn games that bend them to his will. I think he's a phenomenal player. I mean, I was trying to think of the last time someone who in their first season in the Scottish Premiership like really lit it up in that way, and like you need to go back to I don't know, maybe Stephen Naismith at Kilmarnock, but even then, even all the way back then, Naismith was playing as a striker. He didn't score as many goals as Turnbull. And Turnbull's a central midfielder. I'm just every time I watched Turnbull last season, I was just left so excited and so impressed. And I think that I doubt he'll move, this summer, because I think that there's too many question marks at the moment. Obviously over the entire season itself, but just I think until he plays regularly again, I don't see clubs moving for him, just because you never know how players are going to recover from injury. But I mean, certainly I'd be gutted if he came back and he wasn't the same player. But there's nothing to suggest that will happen. I just think he's such a really, really, really exciting player, and I don't think Scotland's really produced a player like him for a long, long time. And I think that he is one of those guys who you think the sky's the limit for him, as long as he can recapture his fitness and try and get back to that level he was at before, because he just offers something that no other player in the league really does, and to do that at such a young age in your debut season is impressive. And like we all keep saying, he's got a massive future ahead of him, like clearly.
I know we're kind of speculating in a sense, obviously, because he's not featured to any great length this season, Stefan, but see if that move, and this is a hypothetical obviously, if that move had gone through to Celtic, would you have expected him to be going into that Celtic team and starting, or at least very much putting up a good fight for a starting place in the middle of that midfield?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, what I've been told, the impression was that he was going to Celtic to be a big player in their first team. I certainly don't think they signed him in the hope of maybe sticking him on the bench for a season or loaning him out. I think he had every intention of only going to Celtic if there were promises made that he would get a chance to prove himself. And this is probably one of the great what ifs. If you can kind of look at the way Ryan Christie's kind of blossomed this season, what would have happened if Turnbull arrived last summer, and suddenly the two of them are basically having to butt heads for the same position. But to be honest, that's kind of that wouldn't surprise me at all. I think he's, we talked about I think it was maybe Alan Campbell or maybe Lewis Ferguson, actually. I think it was Neil said in the last show, being linked with Rangers, and he said he wouldn't be surprised, he'd think he'd walk straight into that Rangers team. And I think for the most part, Turnbull could maybe say the same about Rangers and Celtic as well, to a large extent. He certainly offers something that both clubs would value humongously. Not to kind of just try and speculate and almost wish him away from Motherwell, because I certainly don't think that's the case. But I definitely think we're talking about a player who can already play that level. And, as a result, I quite clearly think he's a player who could make absolute cakewalk it down south, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, as players around him in the Premiership have actually shown in the last couple of seasons. It's not a huge step up. It's not this whole new world. It's a league with a lot more money in it, but if you kind of get your head down and continue doing what you're doing, as the likes of Stuart Armstrong or John McGinn or McLean have shown, you can absolutely stand toe to toe with some of the best players in the world. And I fully expect David Turnbull to be able to illustrate that down the line in his career.
James, anything else you'd like to add to the Turnbull hype train before we move on to number 3?
No, I think we've just about covered it all. the only thing I'd maybe add is that, if he had moved to Celtic, if I were Olivier and Cham, I'd have been looking very nervously over my shoulder. I think that if that deal had gone through, and Cham could very well have been off, because remember there was a lot of, transfer rumours and stuff around that time saying that Cham wasn't particularly happy. And while I'm not sure if Turnbull would have immediately broken into the Celtic midfield, just because you've got that midfield three of McGregor, Brown and Christie, which is obviously a big ask to get ahead of them. But certainly in terms of a central midfielder, he's absolutely good enough to play regularly for Celtic. The only thing would be is just that obviously there are a lot of very good central midfielders there, but I would see Turnbull as easily the second, third or fourth best central midfielder that Celtic would have if he had completed that move.